Welcome to this session on how to learn web development for free.
But before we begin the session, make sure to subscribe to our channel and also hit on the bell icon so that you will never miss an update from us.
Today in this session, we will be going through various topics that are related to web development that you should know before you start learning web development or before you think about pursuing your career into web development. Guys, let's talk about the agenda. So first we will understand what is web development exactly, and then we will move on to understand different type of web development jobs which are out there. After that, we'll talk about the front end part of web development, the back end part of web development, and then what exactly is the full stack development. That is something we'll go ahead and understand. Once we're done with that, we'll understand the learning path as to how you can actually go ahead and learn web development once you understand what it is all about. Okay, so guys, this is the agenda for today. I hope it's clear to you. So let's first start with our first topic, which is what is web development. So guys, web development is basically the practice of creating web applications. So anything and everything that you see on the internet was basically developed under the umbrella term web development, right? So if you visited facebook.com, if you visited Instagram, if you uh, have a chance to visit Intellipaat.com, all these websites are basically created by web developers. So today in this session, we are basically going to understand, the different type of careers that are there in web development, right? And how you can actually go about learning them. All right. So web development is basically the practice of creating websites, and these websites have a lot of things inside them, and that we are basically going to understand what are different kind of skills are required to create a website like Instagram or Facebook or even Intellipaat.com. Okay, so what are the different types of work in web development? Let's understand that. So there are basically three or four types of categories which are there in web development, guys. The first one is front end. So what you see on the browser, the design that you see on the browser, the text that you see on the browser, that's basically called the front end, right? So there's a separate person who designs the front end of the website and decides how the look and feel of the website is going to be, right? So that's the front end part of the website. Then you have something called as the back end part of the website. So back end part of the website basically has all the logics. For example, let's say on when you go to Instagram or when you go to Facebook, let's say you search for a friend of yours, right? So when you search for a friend of yours, that query actually runs in the backend, and only the results are given to you the front end. Now, how is the search happening in the backend? Probably, there's a programming language which has been written in the backend, which takes in the argument which you give in the search bar, then searches all your friends in the database, gets the result, sends it back to the front end, and then it is rendered on the browser. That's when you see that these are all the friends that you searched for. So that's basically the backend. So backend is basically yet another programming language which is written to have all the logics which are required by the front end to show the results. Okay. Then you also have something called as databases. So databases again you will have to learn separately because, like I said, backend is a programming language where you write all the logics. Now, this programming language will sometimes require databases. Like for example, in the search example that I gave you, you require to know about or you require to communicate with database. But let's take some other example. Let's say you are doing some video processing, or when you're doing some image processing. So in that case, databases are not required, but computation is required. Let's say you want to convert an MP4 file into an AVI file. So for this, what you will need to do is you need to uh, convert the uh, MP4 file into the AVI file, and for that, the code, the logic has to be written in the backend. So what you have in the front end is just basically some buttons through which you can browse to your video, and then you finally click on upload. The moment you click on upload, what happens is a logic is fired in the backend through which your file now starts gets uploading, or it starts getting uploaded to a certain place, probably the server, right, the backend server. And once the file is uploaded over there, then the processing starts according to the logic that you have written in the backend. And once the logic is complete, the video is then ready. It basically is given a shareable link, and that shareable link is then forwarded to the front end, which is then given to you guys. So in this case, since video processing is all about logic, you do not require a database over here, but in some cases you require to rely on data, and in that case your backend has to interact with databases. So knowledge of database is also very important. Then there is a specialized person who understands backend, who understands databases, and who understands front end as well, and that guy is called a full stack developer, right? So in web development, there is also a field where a person understands the whole stack of the website. That is, not only this person will be able to design front ends, not only this person would be able to design backends, but also this person would be able to work with databases. And that's what full stack is all about. Okay. Now, today in this session, we our focus is basically to understand how full stack development basically is working, and also at the same time what are the kind of opportunities that you have in full stack. Okay, so obviously a person who is a full stack developer gets paid highly. Reason being, the skill set that he has acquired is actually very rare, because sometimes people make careers in front end only, or they make careers in back end only, or they make careers in database only. Probably some people might be just database administrators, some people might just be backend developers, some people might just be front-end developers. But when you combine all these skills, the resultant what you get is a full stack developer. And obviously, because of the skills that he knows now, his salary is way higher than that of a front-end or a back-end engineer. Having said that, let's first understand what is a front-end engineer, or what is the front-end technology basically that you need to understand. So in front-end, guys, you have mainly three technologies. You have HTML. So HTML is the base. HTML is the place where, so all the text that you see on the website, that is basically written in HTML, right? All the buttons that you see on the website, that is basically written on HTML. So HTML basically provides a structure to a web page. Now, once you have the structure, then you start adding colors, then you start styling your web page, and that is possible using CSS. CSS basically means cascading style sheets, and the main job of CSS is to basically provide style to your website, is to provide colors to your website. All right. So if you want a certain font, if you want that font to be underlined, if you want that font to be italics, that is what CSS do, right? If you want a button to be a certain color, if you want the button to be a certain size, that is possible using CSS. So a person who is a front end developer, or who is probably wanting to become a full stack developer, he should understand how to write HTML files. He should understand how to write CSS files in order to style your web page. Then the third thing that he should know is about JavaScript. Now, what is JavaScript? Now, you would sometimes see, let's take an example. If let's say I go to Intellipaat.com, okay, so this is a website. Now, on this website, if you hover on courses, you will see automatically this pop-up comes in, right? And this only comes when I hover on courses. So this is called a dynamic element on a front end page. Okay. So whenever you have to deal with dynamic elements, whenever there is a logic involved in the front end. For example, the logic over here is the moment I hover on courses, it should show the drop down, or let's say this pop-up comes up after a certain amount of seconds, or let's say this chat application came up after a certain amount of seconds. So whatever uh, dynamic things that you see in the front end are basically done using JavaScript. Now there are obviously some things, for example, let's say if I search, so if I'm searching anything, let's say if I search for full stack over here, and when I hit enter, at this point in time, JavaScript is not being used. At this point in time, my request was sent to the backend. My backend fetched all the results and then it sent it back to the front end. Here, JavaScript was not involved. But let's say, uh, like I said, if let's say I do anything which basically is dynamic in nature, for example, okay, for example, when I'm going to this login button, you can see that the color is being changed, right? It's changing to gray color. So this is again possible using JavaScript. So anything dynamic on the website which happens based on certain events, if you're trying to configure something like that, that is possible using JavaScript. So JavaScript is basically responsible for all the dynamic content that you see on the website, which basically responds to events. Okay, so this was the front end part of the website. Now let's understand, what the backend part is. Uh, okay, so before we understand what backend is, there is also something called as front-end framework. Now, what happens is there are two ways that you can create any front end of a website. You can either write everything from scratch, or what the open source community has done is they have written some functions which they understand are the most used in any website when they are created, right? And a framework is nothing but a collection of these functions so that the job of a front-end developer becomes easy. For example, let's say we were talking about highlighting that button, right? Or let's say there is some other uh, aspect of feature that you want to add in your front end. Now, if let's say you do not use any framework, in that case, let's say you have to write 200 or 300 lines of code in order to achieve a feature. But when you're using frameworks, because there are inbuilt functions, there are inbuilt features in this framework which are ready to use, instead of writing 300 lines, that same work can now be done in 50 to 60 lines, or let's say even 10 lines in some cases, right? So frameworks are already created features for a particular front end programming language. And these frameworks are for different languages. uh, for example, you have a JS framework, or let's say you use some other programming language, you would have a different framework for that as well. So in this session today, we will be focusing our attention on JS frameworks. So, the most some of the most popular front-end frameworks are Angular. So Angular is the front-end framework which is used for front-end development. Then you have something called as React. Then you have something called as Vue as well. So these are some of the most popular front-end frameworks which are used in a website. Right now, all of them cannot be used together. Only one of them will be used in a website to achieve a job. All right. Angular and React are the most famous ones. But lately, what has happened is the focus has now shifted more onto React than Angular, because with React you also get features such as mobile development. For example, there is something called as React Native. So React Native basically helps you to create responsive mobile design templates. Okay, so not only the code that you're writing will run great on a computer like this screen that you just seen, but if you also visit that website on the mobile, uh, even there the responsive elements will work great, right? So if you were to do this in Angular, you would have to write
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides full stack web development course in collaboration with ENICT IIT Guwahati. The course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
separate code for mobile and then make it work. But with React Native as extension in React, what you can do is the same code can be used what you wrote using the React Native feature of React, and that same code can also be now implemented on mobile with a little tweaks, right? So because of this reason, because of less time being involved in getting a website ready for both mobile and PC, React has become more popular. And even when you search for a full stack developer, you will see that 70 to 80% of the job descriptions will basically have React as a skill set in the front end technologies. Okay, so React is something that has become very important, and I told you the reason because React also has components which are readily available for mobile development. For example, React Native. Okay, then again you have something called as Vue. Now Vue is again a JavaScript framework or a front-end framework, and it is very similar to what Angular is, and but it is not that popular. I mean, it's a good framework. I mean, it can get the same job done as Angular or React, but I mean, like I said, there are some more features in React, for example, mobile development. So the intent is same. The intent is to make the job easy to create front-end websites. But yet again, when you talk about jobs which are out there, React is the most popular framework among all the front-end jobs which are out there. Okay. So now that we understand this, let's also talk about the backend technologies. So in backend, like I told you, that backend is basically a place where you write all the logics, where if any communication is required with the database, that is done, and then the information is passed on to the front end. So that's what a backend, language is. So it's also called server-side language or server-side programming, and it basically deals with uh, anything and everything which is required in terms of running a logic, in terms of running a job, which probably you do not want to run on the client system. So when I say client system, what happens is, let's say we are dealing with this website, right? So this website has now been loaded on my system. It has been loaded on my browser, the code, and that's how I'm able to see it. But let's say if I search for something, and if that code I include in the front end section of the website, then I as a user, what I can do is I can just right click over here. I can go to view page source, and then I can see the code that you have written, right, in order to connect to the database. But for connecting to the database, you need credentials. For connecting to the database, you need a lot of things that you don't want to make public, and that is the reason that connection to databases are actually implemented in the backend. So whatever you write in the backend, you cannot see in the view page source. In the view page source, you can only see the front end part of the website. So let's say if I go to view page source, this is the whole code which is written for this website, and I can go through it. I can understand what the code is. I can see what they have done, etc. But when you talk about the backend code, that backend code is not listed over here, right? Similarly, one more thing that I wanted to point out was that the the processing part, you do not want to load your client's computer with logics. For example, if you have to do image or video processing, that processing you want to do it on your server so that your user's system, is not hampered with any performance issues. For example, if I as a user, if I go to Instagram and I suddenly realize the moment I go to Instagram, my system, my CPU level goes up, my CPU level is used more, or if I'm using a laptop, the battery is getting consumed more when I'm using Facebook.com. Obviously, I'll try not to use that website. Obviously, I will try not to. use an application which drains my battery. You would have also seen when you use a mobile phone, some applications take up a lot of battery, right? For example, when you play games on your mobile phone, it takes up a lot of battery. Why? Because in that case, when you're playing a game, the processing is happening on your device, right? Similarly, you do not want the processing to be happening on the client side because you want to give the user the best experience possible. So in that case, to differentiate between just showing the results on a user's computer and separating the processing part on some other computer, you have backend languages. Now in backend languages, some of the few languages that you can write in is PHP. Then you have something called as Python. Then you have Ruby. Then you have Node.js. Then you have Java, right? And then there are a lot of other programming languages as well, where using which you can basically write a backend logic. Okay. Now the most famous among these is basically Node.js. Why is it the most famous? Let me give you a recap when we saw the different kind of front-end frameworks that are basically there. So all these frameworks, they are basically JavaScript frameworks, which basically means that anyone and everyone who wants to write dynamic code for the front end, they need to learn JavaScript, and only then they will be able to implement these frameworks. Now, given the fact that you have to learn JavaScript, let's now again come back to backend technologies. So in these technologies, you will notice that PHP is yet another programming language to learn about. Python is yet another programming language to learn about. Ruby is yet another programming language to know about. But Node.js is basically a backend framework which makes use of JavaScript again. So if you know how to write JavaScript for front end, it will be very easy for you to even learn Node.js, because in this case, you do not have to learn one more programming language. You just have to understand how this framework of Node.js basically works, and that's about it. If you learn that, you become a backend developer automatically. Now, because it's first of all very easy for developers to transition from front end to back end technologies because of the JS part being common, a lot of companies to save costs are using Node.js as a backend technology, because in that case, they don't have to train their employees extensively on a new technology. They can just tell their employees, let's learn about a new framework, and then they become automatically backend developers and they start developing for you. Now, obviously, it's not that easy the way I'm telling you, because when you start writing logics for the backend, you have to have high performance code, uh, which basically means it should be very efficient in doing whatever it is doing, right? It should not take much resources. It should take the minimum resources possible to get a job done. And when you have to write a code like this, obviously it requires a lot of experience from your side, right? But given the fact that whenever you are writing any backend code, it is very important to have the ease of learning factor into learning something. For example, if you guys are new to web development, obviously you would prefer to learn the whole stack with minimum effort possible. And for that minimum effort, you have the React.js framework, because if you understand the front end part completely, you understand JS completely, then it will be very easy for you to learn front end framework and the back end framework that we're discussing about, which is Node.js. Now, because of this particular fact that uh, ease of transitioning is there, companies have started using Node.js in the backend, but also the fact that Node.js is very light in nature, and also it is very powerful in nature as well. Because of that feature as well, companies have now started to use Node.js. Okay. Now, 90 or 80% of the job descriptions that you're going to find out there will have Node.js as a backend listed, right? So obviously there is a job market for Python as well. There's a job market for PHP as well. But most of the modern companies, most of the modern software that you work with, that you see, or that you use every day is basically based on Node.js. Okay, moving forward, what is full stack? Raj says React. Yeah, so React is, I think I've already talked about React, which is basically a front end technology. And it is, again, it's the R in the MERN stack stands for React.js. Okay, moving forward, now let's talk about what full stack basically means. So, full stack, primarily, when you talk about popularity, there are two types of stacks which are prevalent in the industry. One is the main stack, the other is a MERN stack. I'll talk about it in a little more while. But talking about the skill sets that a full stack developer has, he knows the complete front end paradigm. He knows completely the backend paradigm, and he also understands databases. So if you have all these three skill sets, if you accumulate all these three skill sets, you can easily become a full stack developer. Okay. What is the learning part to become a web developer? Now, before we move on, guys, uh, I hope you now have a brief idea about what web development is, the different parts of it, uh, the different roles, that is a front end developer role, a back end developer role, a database administrator. Then I told you a guy who knows all of these things is basically called a full stack developer. And obviously, this guy is highly paid because of the skills that he has accumulated. So you don't have to work or change anything in case you want to change your application uh, in the way it is going to interact with the database. So guys, if you want to become a full stack developer, first you will have to learn a programming language. So in this case, you will have to learn JavaScript, right? Then you will have to learn front end. You will have to understand what is backend. You will have to understand database technologies, which is MongoDB in this case. Uh, then it's probably better to get certified in these technologies from a popular body. For example, if you take a course with a company like Intellipaat, they will give you a certificate that yes, you have learned all these technologies. And we as an e-learning company, for example, in Intellipaat, we have actually trained about a lot of Fortune 500 companies, right? So our certification value is going to help you when you apply to all the training partners that we have already trained. Even if, let's say, a company does not know about Intellipaat, uh, a certification also helps you when you include it in your resume. It basically increases your chances of getting a job. Reason being, the certificate will have the right set of keywords that the HR managers, they basically look out for. So whenever there is a job opening, what the HR managers do is, or what the hiring manager basically does is, he goes through all the applicants and he goes through searches for certain keywords that are there in a certain resume, right? Let's say if you apply for a certain company, there are 1,000 applicants. So it is a manual task to go through all the 1,000 resumes. So that never happens. What happens is there's a HR software with the company, and what the HR software does is it basically takes an input as some keywords that they're looking out for. For example, if a company is looking out for a full stack developer, and let's say they work on React, Express, Mongo, and Node.js. These are the keywords that they will be searching for in the software, and all the resumes which have these keywords will basically pop up, and that's how they are shortlisted. So when you include a certification in your resume, all these keywords automatically come in your resume, and the chances of you getting shortlisted become more. And once your resume is ready, once you have the certification in place, then you start applying for jobs. So this would be the learning path for you.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides full stack web development course. in collaboration with ENICT IIT Guwahati. The course link of which is given in the description below.